Wait, okay. All right, welcome to another edition of God Family Purpose, the show that sheds light on our shared human experience through the lens of faith, family, and purpose. I'm Amanda Gilchrist, your host, and today we're talking about breaking the cycle, healing abandonment, and daddy issues to find your purpose in God and family. So, in this podcast episode, we're going to dive deep into the often overlooked and unaddressed wounds of abandonment and fatherlessness through expert insights, some personal stories, and we're going to explore some practical steps to overcome these traumas and live a fulfilling life centered again on God and family. So today I'm welcoming in my guest co-host is Christian Jackson, the great daddy issues expert. Thank you for coming in today.
Hey girl, hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited, per usual, to go ahead and dive into what we don't like to talk about. So let's get it.
Listen, I think it's a thing, right? So so we're both therapists by training.
Hmm.
And people sometimes think that it's easy for us to jump into those hard conversations too.
Hmm.
Go ahead, look. I see that facial expression. I have a hard time covering mine up too, cuz tell me. I want to
Yes,
hear.
yes. It's actually having I was being triggered by my own clients, which is how my books were born. So I was doing therapy for a while, and I think we talked about a little bit before we started recording how some people around us think that we just do therapy instead of like really believing in the power of really sitting with someone and like who's trained and can help us to work some things out. I was the person who just thought, oh, I can go in here, I have a book, I can do the therapy, just get out of it, right? You don't realize how triggered you're going to be when you're meeting with people who have similar life experiences or don't. And it just brings up something random you hadn't thought about. We're human too, right? And
Mhm.
so I wasn't necessarily prepared for that. But, when we do our assessment with our clients, the very beginning, it's basically an interview for those of y'all who don't know. Our very first section, we get to know all of your business, about your family history and stuff like that. And I kept hearing things about that were very redundant, about how they were handling relationships, about their family structure, about who was there and who wasn't and why, and how that impacted them without them really knowing. I'm like, damn, this is kind of like me. And so I was going through something which I described in my book with my dad, around 21, where we first really kind of fell out, and I was studying to be a therapist, 2, 3, 4 years later, and I'm just like, God, this is why I act like this, and this is why my husband triggers the crap out of me, and why my kids, trigger me, and I act this way or whatever. And so the therapist that I was working with at the time, she said, hey, why don't you write a letter to your dad? You know, that assignment that we give to our clients.
Mhm. Yes.
Or we tell them journal about this or whatever it is. And so when I really started writing, and because I'm a writer anyway, ironically that is a skill I know comes from both my parents, because my mom writes poetry, but um my dad's also a writer, so I just kind of organize certain thoughts, because I'm like, I feel like nobody's really talking about daddy issues the way that it needs to be talked about. So I immediately saw a gap and I wanted to fill it. And I didn't realize this, mind you, until like 5 or 6 years after doing therapy. Let me just be clear, because I had to go work out stuff myself.
Mhm.
That's where it started, is how my book was born, because I just started writing like, what would I really want someone to tell me?
Yep.
I needed to provide services that I wish I would have had when I was in my most intense anxiety and depression, not really knowing that's what it was, right? Because Black
Mhm.
women, we're not allowed to think that way. We just kind of tunnel vision and go.
Yes.
But once I slowed down enough to go to therapy and really start to see some things come to a head, I'm like, huh, this is something. I think I'm on to something here. And even then, I felt like, oh gosh, is this uncomfortable? Me telling you you have daddy issues, like it was a whole thing. But that's how it got started. I specialize in trauma. I treat daddy issues the way that it is. It's emotional trauma, sometimes physical, sexual, unfortunately emotional abuse. And so I treat it from that lens, with everything we already know how to do, Amanda. Like, we're trained as
Mhm.
CBT therapists, trauma specifically trained therapists, and I'm just tweaking it in a way to where we are having a very specific conversation about what symptoms of daddy issues are. Nobody's done that before me that I know of. So when I'm giving you what daddy issues are, we're going to start this baseline foundation conversation, like your abandonment, your rejection, and why this shows up this way. I give you a list of symptoms like you would when you look at the book, the DSM-5 we use, the TR. Um, to diagnose clients. I want people to be able to say, when you leave CJ, me, Christian Jackson, just so
Mm-hmm.
y'all know, when you leave
CJ.
me, then you know what daddy issues are. You take what works, you leave what doesn't, and you just work it out. I just want you to have the language to be able to say what daddy issues are, how they may or may not be affecting me, and how that looks. And so, throughout the rest of my book, and when I was really talking about in the beginning, I self-published it in 2020. I'm showing you daddy issues in your marriage, with your friendships, at work, with your kids, so you can really see how it flows out without you really knowing, and then you get those practical steps in between each chapter where you get to kind of work out what you just processed. So it's a very, I have it right here, it's very hefty. Trigger
Yes.
warning, work yourself through it slowly. Yes,
Slowly.
because the
And probably
workbook can
with a
take you there, but
yeah, and probably a good support system too. So I'm so
mm-hmm,
glad you shared in such deep context there because I want to
mm-hmm,
like break a couple of things apart. So, one, I love how you take that very practical approach with daddy issues, right? So, my biggest thing as a therapist, as a person, right, out here learning in the world, especially when you're learning as a therapist in school, there's not as much practicality until you actually start doing the work with clients. And
right.
I supervise clinicians specifically because I want to have a hand in their practical application because that's the part that makes it all come together, right? Knowing
Mm-hmm,
all this book
mm-hmm.
knowledge is we
It's
have to
nice, but
understand the human experience, right? And so
mm-hmm,
people will constantly say like you probably don't get it or you know no, well I'm a human first and I'm a human that understands how different things in our lives can impact the way we function, things that we probably don't even realize. So your daddy issues was like it's actually born out. It's like a segment of like the attachment style. So it's breaking down that
mm-hmm.
attachment style with your dad and looking at how that presents. And it's funny because I would say like 99.999% of my clients, I have them take an attachment style quiz in the beginning. And
Period.
that's because you need to know what your primary relationships have done, how they influence you. You have no
Mm-hmm,
idea. And I'm sure you get this all the time. People are like,
mm-hmm.
oh my God, really? I'm, I'm 45 years old and I'm just now learning this about myself.
Mm-hmm,
Welcome. We're all
mm-hmm.
still learning. There's so much
Yep.
below the surface. So, like, and that whole trigger by clients thing, people don't realize that can happen too.
I still get
Okay.
triggered by clients, and they teach me so much. Like I'll sit here with my own notepad here. I'm at my desk right now, and I'm like, "Ooh, sis, you said a word." And because I'm not, I am an expert. You are an expert. We have been trained clinically, but they are the expert on their lives, and so
Absolutely.
I'm taking this, and I'm like, "Oh, that's really interesting," and I write that down and um really kind of sit with those things, take it to my own therapist because I see her every other week. Shout out to Lady O. I love her so much because
Mm-hmm.
I really get a chance to process things that have been brought up in me. And part of doing daddy issues work is understanding attachment. You cannot talk daddy or mommy issues, which I've been doing a lot more lately too, without talking about attachment, how and why you show up in relationships, why you
Mm-hmm.
may show up as more avoidant, why you may dismiss or put walls up rather than engage with your partner physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, because there is something that you learned and that you took to heart to protect yourself. And so it's a lot of like you said, you'll have a 45-year-old client, and I have clients who are the same age and they're older than me, right? Like I'm 36, I'll be 37 next month. I get
Yeah.
clients who are older than me and they'll present as younger than both of us because trauma has stunted them emotionally to where they are really making decisions like their 16-year-old self, 10-year-old self. Like, I know you been in sessions where you see them
Oh,
dissociate and they just like kind of
yes.
shrink into like the little girl or the way that they even articulate or even their tone of voice, they'll dissociate, like kind of shift back to that person because
Yes.
they were experiencing trauma, probably on top of trauma on top of trauma for years. And then you get to a point where I don't have time to make connections. I don't have time to make friends and have meaningful relationships or trust
Mm-hmm.
people because I'm stuck
Mm-hmm.
here and I need to survive. And so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what we do as therapists is unfortunately we're poking holes in a lot of narratives that have kept them safe for a while.
Yes.
and they believe that. So I recognize myself as a threat, quote unquote, because we're kind of coming and challenging them with things, not telling you how to think, but asking and giving you permission and empowering you to think of things a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So even those women who say, Christian, like, I have a relationship with my dad, I'm a daddy's girl. What do you mean I have daddy issues? And I'm like, well, I meet a lot of daddy's girls that have daddy issues. Those are my perfectionists and my people pleasers, right? Like it comes out in the way that you attach in your relationships, the way that you show up in your marriage, in your dating relationships. Daddy's girls show up very specifically, as far as I can
Mm.
tell. But it's
Girl,
about giving it a chance. That's it.
listen. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you just stepped all over my toes just now.
Not purposely, not
You
purposely.
stepped all on my toes, but I'm okay with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because so like in previous episodes, like I shared that I came from a blended family and then I created my own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, coming from that blended family, my dad, who's not my biological father, was there for me from a very young age. And you let anybody else tell it, you can't tell me any different. Like, he fed me for so long, we look alike. Okay, like, that's my
Mm-hmm.
daddy. And, I didn't realize until much, much, much later that I really had daddy issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a daddy's girl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you said that perfectionist people pleaser, sign me up, girl, because I was the first on the list. Like, you at the
Uh-huh.
front of the classroom raising your hand, you getting all A's. Like, they had to have a whole talk with me because I came home with a B and it tore my world
Oh,
apart. They was like,
devastating. Yeah.
girl, you gotta, even in, girl, get my master's
Mhm.
degree. I
Mhm.
challenged my teacher on this particular paper because I felt like he didn't really know what he wanted in that paper. And I know that paper was A worthy. I mean, I went back through that thing. And that paper caused my grade to change in the course to a B. Now, all this time I had
Mhm.
all A's in my master's degree. And I was like, I
Mhm.
challenged it after he posted the grade. I said, that's not my grade. So then he
Mhm.
tried to, well, I just want to talk to you about like, why does it have to be an A? I said, look,
Oh,
we're not
that was
going there.
actually what I was thinking in my head. Just I was like, what is the meaning behind that A? What does it
But I
matter?
wasn't listen. I wasn't ready to talk about that. I said, right now, you gonna give me
Mhm.
this A, sir, because you can't tell me why I don't deserve it. So conversation done, right? but but there was this like tug of war. So I ended up being
Mhm.
disorganized in my
Mhm.
attachment style because
Mhm.
I had the
Mhm.
biological father who was not there. I had a dad who was, and so I wanted to make sure that I was like being a good daughter and like showing up. And
Mhm.
girl, he would just say something like he would say a statement of disappointment. He would give me a look of disappointment, and my whole world fell apart.
Yeah.
And I ended up carrying that into my relationship with my
Me
husband.
too. Me
I
too.
couldn't be myself, and it wasn't necessarily because he wasn't allowing me to be myself. I wasn't allowing me to
Because
be
you had
myself.
a standard, right? That nobody even put on you, right? Same.
Exactly. I was like, I
Mm.
got to be up here. I got to perform like this. If he wants
Mhm.
this, I got to make it happen. I can't say I'm tired. I can't say and I'm just going around doing everything and not complaining and not like, setting
Mhm.
boundaries, not tending to my own needs. And then
Mhm.
it creates this crazy whirlwind dynamic later when you
Yeah.
realize that you're operating that way and then you decide that you need to do something different. And then that causes a whole nother set of issues
Then
in your marriage.
everybody in the family has to adjust, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
because this ain't who you was. You changing.
Mhm.
I was like,
Mhm.
no, really? I'm just coming into myself, right?
I'm resting. I'm speaking up for myself. You can fold your own laundry. You can like, and I'm thinking about my kids, like even the skills I'm trying to teach them, life skills. I'm like, when you guys decide to marry, if you do, your partner does not have to do all the things for you. You are perfectly capable, and your
Mm-hmm.
partner deserves to take a break. You can share this load. That's what it's about. It,
Girl.
it feeds it, it feeds into so many things, but it starts with you having had made that decision to say, hey, because a lot of us will run into that wall first, where like I literally crashed when I was doing everything you were saying as far as trying to be perfect, whatever. Because if I couldn't control how my daddy saw me, I can control how my husband and my kids saw me, how my friends saw me, how my
Mm,
employer saw me. And so
mm,
that rolled into Christian the perfectionist, and Christian's a people pleaser. She doesn't say no, she'll say yes to the extra work, all of these things. And like you said, I'm coming to my own and I'm about to be on this journey where I have never had this role I'm about to go into before. I just got hired for a new position. I'll be a director of the college campus for the counseling center. I have not been anyone's employee in 3 years, having done this entrepreneur thing and really getting into my daddy issues movement groove. Even as Christian the employee, my perfectionism, my people pleasing showed up. I was triggered by one of my older supervisors. That's how I actually opened the book, me cussing him out because he triggered me for my daddy issues, all me as far as how I
Mm-hmm.
responded. I can take responsibility for that. But still, I am walking into this new position excited, knowing I'm a boss, knowing I'm ready. I have a healthy level of anxiety, but what Christian's not going to do is play the game so much so that she gets lost or be motivated by fear. And that is how I made a
Mm-hmm.
lot of decisions growing up. I was so fearful that if I didn't do this, it wouldn't get done right. And then I would be left here in poverty. Because I was homeless my senior year of college. I mean, of high school, senior year of high school, trying to figure out how to make that transition into my freshman year of college. I was living in a hotel room with my mom that whole year. And so, like, if I'm thinking about this poverty mindset that came from more than just my daddy issues, right? It's daddy issues is a factor. It's a major one, but it's a factor in our upbringing. Um, I know what I'm going to be taking into this new role. New role. I know that I can set boundaries. I know that I'm allowed to say stuff, and that's not how I operated before. All because
Yeah.
I paused and I was like, Christian, you are the table. Bring it. You didn't get hired for no reason. People don't come to you for no reason.
Yes.
Mhm.
So that I want to hone in on that thing you said, like being
Mhm.
motivated by fear. And
Mm.
I don't think a lot of us like realize that we have been motivated by fear. Like there was so much success that I achieved, but it was fear-based success. And it's so
That is exactly.
different.
Oh, Amanda, we are the same. It's so like it's exhausting. It is
It
so
is.
exhausting to
It
live
is.
in fear. And ironically, my favorite Bible verse is Second Timothy 1:7, 2:7. Now I
You
gotta
talking about
Google
for
it.
God has not given you a
Not
spirit
giving us a spirit of
fear
fear.
of fear? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
That is ironically my favorite verse because I needed something to hang on to. I'm like, God, you told me I don't have to be afraid. Like you, I don't. What am I afraid? Like this is. I gravitate towards that verse so much because of the level of fear I had. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was, if I don't make this meal right, my husband may not like me. It just automatically went
Who,
there.
girl? We you said we the same. Okay, we definitely do the same. We just embodied each other. Like I
Yes.
swear.
And it's
So
like when I finally shared that with him, though, he's like, "Babe, really? Like, I just asked you to use more salt. I didn't say that you were terrible." But that's where my mind went because I'm like, if I don't do this right, then I'm not going to be the best wife. It sucks. And and my friend actually told me once because I was actually fired from my last job. Long story. Another reason why I didn't go straight back into the workforce. I was bullied so horribly and it was terrible
mm,
before they fired me. It was a whole mess. And so when I came into entrepreneurship, I was forced, right? Like whatever. I had to figure that shit out. Sorry.
mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can curse, but I had to figure it out.
We
Um,
holy niggas.
right, okay. Just saying, okay. Um, so I had to figure that thing out. I had to figure out how to be a boss, how to make decisions, and I do think that I was in this season purposely to learn to trust myself. And so I've had a lot of success. I believe
Mm-hmm.
just for Christian, not like objectively speaking, like it's a lot for me to have owned something and started to practice, and all these people want to work with me, and I'm so flattered and honored, and I love being a part of the journey, but I was still scared. And my friend would say, Christian, slow down. Why are you? Your work ethic is like unmatched. And I'm like, you have no idea that the reason I'm working so hard is because my husband's not working and it's all on me. And if we don't do this, we don't have anywhere to go. Like, and that's stupid because we both have our families here. But I'm like, my brain was automatically trained to say, Christian, if you don't handle this, you're going to be out on the street. The reason you're
Mm-hmm.
working so hard, it looks so great on Facebook, and Couch of Christian looks so pretty, and the branding is nice, but y'all don't know I'm crying every single night, like really trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to make these books balance, how to get groceries in the house. I am scared. And so I tell my clients, you know how we do like appropriate self disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
I have Crohn's disease, which is a GI issue where my body
Yeah.
um, my guts don't process food anymore, right? My anxiety got so bad that I developed a chronic illness to where I have to take a shot every 8 weeks just so that my intestines will digest my food.
Mm.
That is how I was like, that was also the stress of my lifestyle. It was awful. And I wasn't managing my anxiety at all because I was living in fear. And when you are mentally living in fear, what I tell my clients, because I'm really big on making sure you know physically and mentally how that
Oh,
connects.
yes.
I was tensed up like this all the time and didn't really realize it. And so
Mm.
my body was fighting itself. The Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disease, which means CJ's body is fighting her own self because she's always staying ready. She got to get ready, which sounds cute until you are always in constant fear. And so I'm
Yes.
like, let me be a cautionary tale. I have a chronic illness because I did not manage my fear and anxiety well, right? That's something
Yes.
that I learned very directly from watching my parents interact. I talked about daddy issues, but it's also watching how my mom handled those things too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's why we got to talk about daddy issues because we need to get to the root of why you are walking and living in this fear and in anxious space.
So I'm just this is not funny, okay? But it's one of those things where like I take the human being and the counselor with me everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was talking to this administrator at my son's school,
Mm-hmm.
because we are very like I'm gonna show up. You can't just tell me
Period. Me
something
too.
happened. What proof do you have? Who you talk to? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm there. Like we both there. Me and my husband. We just like now what now?
Mm-hmm.
Now make it
Mm-hmm.
make sense. Can you show it to me on video? Like who did you get
Yeah.
statements from? Right? And so, she goes and tells me all this stuff. She got her master's degree, but she got her bachelor's in psychology. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she told me that to like make me feel like she like knew everything there was to know.
Yeah. That's why she
Um,
told you.
yeah, and then she told me about this like little retreat that all of the principals went to, and it was we did this one section, and it was like a therapy session, and I learned my success script, and I was like, oh, what's your success script?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, when I was growing up, my dad, he would never say a mean thing out of the way to me, all this other stuff. But when I did something really good, he would give me that compliment, tell me I was so great and so smart. And so now I'm like, I do this, I do this, I do that. Like I have to be successful. I have to have that perfection. And she was like, yeah, and that's my success script. I said, yeah, we call that a negative core belief. And
Mm-hmm.
she just kind of tried to glaze by it real fast, right?
She wouldn't have
I
taken
said,
that.
yeah, because I like if I told you we talked about our profession. I said, yeah, I'm a therapist by
Mm-hmm.
training, and I don't really like come in and try to like
Right.
start
Me
assessing
neither.
people.
People try to tell you their business all the time too.
Yeah, they
I'm
do,
off the clock. Please
and
don't.
you when you they don't even know you're a therapist, right? Like people stop me in the lines
Mm-hmm.
at like gas stations and Walmart, and they just
Mm-hmm.
start spilling, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. But I just in this moment, like I was just like, boy, like we're putting all kind of acceptable labels on things that we should not. That's not a success script. That's
Yeah,
fear-based success, right? You have this
that is.
core belief that I have to be doing something to get your praise.
Mm-hmm.
No.
It's an external locus of control where you just expect every like you're not. Are you telling me you can't motivate yourself? Like you only get that if you and even down to like love languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mine, my top two are words of affirmation and physical touch. And so, sis, when you said that, I'm like, oh, she's likely a words of affirmation girl. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but those are our trauma responses. Like I have this love language because I probably did not get hugged enough. Physical touch, that's me. Words of affirmation, I would like to have heard some things to validate me, just so I can know what it feels like that I was
Yes.
at least on the right track. Not that I needed an ego boost, but am
Mm-hmm.
I doing this right? So that's where, like, even a daddy issue symptom is like the inability to trust self.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to stand on our own and believe what we say and believe that if we make a mistake that we can come out of it. So like even as therapists, we use this language as coping, right? Like I tell you how you can cope with daddy issues. Let's talk about what that looks like. It doesn't mean we're going to get rid of daddy issues, period. I had my session on Monday with my therapist. And I was going in about how nervous I was about this job. I'm going to be a director. I've never been a boss, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, I really was talking about this one person that I feel like I need to prove myself to that person. And she was like, I
Mm.
wonder who that person really represents. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was over my daddy issues. Because my dad and I are not talking right now. And I'm just like, and of course, if I really was real with myself, I'm like, I wonder what daddy would say if he knew. I am a director at a university, at a major one. And you're not here to say good job or whatever. I'm a whole 36-year-old adult who has not heard from her dad since 2017 when we last fell out. I'm just like, I still am working to prove to this man that I've made it, that it's okay. Like, it's not enough for me to just have been there. So we talk about coping not so that you can get rid of anxiety, because there isn't such thing as a healthy level of anxiety. It's a matter of how to live in harmony with it, what to do when your daddy issue symptoms arise. I go to my tribe. I talk to my
Mm-hmm.
therapist. I talk to my husband
Mm-hmm.
about it. I'm like, bro, this is what I got going on. And sometimes you got to be
Yes.
called on it. So it's coping is just how to live with. Because if you don't
Yes.
feel, you're dead. Period. It
That
is what it
part, and that's one of the caveats I love to give people at
mm-hmm.
therapy, right? So like you come in with me for a session, you're like, oh my goodness, I feel so much better. And I'm like, yeah, so no, this is a state change, not a trait change. Okay, what you're
Oh,
experiencing right now, you're
I like that.
experiencing this high from the session, right? So it feels
Mm-hmm.
good, but you still got work to do because 2 days later, when something else happened, you're gonna be back at it
Right.
again. And I can't, I can't be the source of bringing you off that high, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
to, or bring giving you that high. You have to learn how to rebalance yourself. That's what you
Mm-hmm.
came for. So it's not that all the problems gonna go away, that life is gonna be perfect. It's about
Mm-hmm.
living, learning how to live in peace in the middle of chaos, right? That's actually what peace is.
Yeah.
It's not the everything around you is peaceful, because never. You would have to have
Period.
control over everything, because never, okay? Uh, so I was like, okay, we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna have to learn how to recognize that there's chaos around you and have peace. And I learned that the most when I was in state government, and I spent so much time, like I was getting up a statewide crisis program,
Mm.
like, and I was all over the place. And this was 24/7, like phone off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness. So I've dealt with suicide, I've dealt with suicide assessment, because that's one of the things that a lot of therapists like shy away from. Like it feels like a
Yeah.
scary thing to like address and talk about. But honey, by the time I was deep in that thing, new counselors would be calling me in a panic, and I'm like, first of all, just take a deep breath, okay? Because
Mm-hmm.
like, I was surprised at myself. I'm like, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
chilling,
Yep.
and they're over here freaking out, and I'm like, that's what we're trying to work towards in life, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
trying to work towards that place of, I don't have to solve everything. I don't have to know all the answers. I don't have to get it right every single time. I
Mm-hmm.
just have to show up and be myself, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much freedom in that, but we don't realize it really until we actually get to that place, right?
Okay.
Like, I don't know about you, but I didn't realize how freeing it was to really come to terms with my issues, because coming
Oh
to
yeah.
terms with it helped me not feel so attacked by
Yeah.
people, or attacked
Mm-hmm.
by what people said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because my husband would say something and I was just like, immediately, like, I was like, are you coming for my life right now?
Right.
This is
Right.
a problem.
Right.
But until we come to terms, and when things like that happen, we don't realize like that's an indicator. Okay, if that
Mm-hmm.
thing moves you, it moves you for a reason. Why
Yep.
does it move you?
Let's
What does it
figure it out.
represent? What is it about really? And I love how you talked about like, what we believe, because, and this is what I'm gonna tell people all day, every day. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
your behaviors are your belief system. You do what
Mm-hmm.
you do because you believe what you
You
believe,
believe
and
it.
so
Mm-hmm.
in order to change your actions, you have to change the underlying beliefs. But most of the time, we don't know what those are. And this is a conversation that I think has to be on a whole nother podcast episode. I'm probably
Mm-hmm.
gonna have like you and a couple of other, we probably gonna have to do like four or
A
five of us,
series.
right?
Sounds like a
Yes.
series. Yeah.
And but that belief thing is so powerful, because if you really think about it, okay, your beliefs that you carry are more than likely developed in an environment that you had zero control over.
Yep.
And
And
so,
it was just to survive.
and the
Hmm.
things that you carry, the beliefs, the values, does it belong to you, or is it your grandma or your
Hmm.
mama or your
Hmm.
daddy, or because people weren't around, that's a belief that you carry because you didn't know the answer and you had to come up with one. And so the
Hmm.
kid in you said it's because you're not worthy.
Yes.
It's because you can't trust people. And so
Hmm.
now you going over here setting all these relationships on fire, whatever they may
Hmm.
be,
Based
and
on
you don't realize it.
undeveloped beliefs. Yeah, it's based on. I'm sorry to cut you off. I got
You
excited
could.
because you said something. You're starting all these fires in your relationship. It's based on old beliefs or wrong beliefs in the first place. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why that psychoeducational piece is so important, especially about trauma, because, like you said, if I know why I tick, then that awareness
Mm-hmm.
automatically decreases your anxiety because you're like, oh, I'll do this thing. Like I'm about to start a merch line. I have a mug that one or two people took offense to, right? Because they don't understand the movement, but whatever. So I have a mug that I want to launch. It's going to say, "Your daddy issues are showing, sis, sir." And it's just oh, okay. This is, I tell my clients all the time, hey, sis, your trauma showing, your daddy issues are showing, because we need to know. Oh, so that's not a dig at you. That's like, okay, that like you said is an indicator. So what is it that's making me feel unsafe right now in this relationship? Because oh, my daddy issues are showing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is that abandonment. He's giving me no reason, or she has given me no reason to think that they're going to leave me. But I, for some reason, am already prepped my body for this because my body remembers the last time daddy left, I never saw him again, or he was present but wasn't really present, if you catch that, right? So like we have these indicators, like you said, physical indicators. I have to know what my trauma response is. My brain as a child had to make up a story because no one told me a story. So like you said, as a
Mm-hmm.
kid, you probably as a kid you're not going to say I'm not worthy, right? Like that's like a really that's a more mature thing. But as a kid, it was probably something like, oh, I'm not cool enough, or I must not be
Mm-hmm.
good enough for my daddy to pay attention to me, or my mom to pay attention to me. And that's the story your brain had to make up to make sense of this thought or this feeling of unsettledness, of abandonment. Which again, as a kid, you're not going to call it abandonment. You're just going to say like, I don't see my daddy, right? But it rolls into into adult language.
So I think it was the book
Hmm.
"The Body Keeps the Score." I can't
Yes,
remember.
that's exactly what. Yes, it's Dr. Becker
Okay,
Vanderpool. Hmm.
where yes, so the young lady developed. There's a young lady that developed daddy issues
Hmm.
or abandonment issues with men, and it
Hmm.
influenced the men she chose. But her
Hmm.
daddy was a very like big part of her life. Always showed up for her, was there for her, did everything. One night apparently there was a storm and the power went out. Mom and
Hmm.
dad went on the other side of the house in the kitchen, so they were awake late at night.
Hmm.
She's calling for her dad. He
Hmm.
never heard her.
Hmm.
That one event, that one time where he
Hmm.
wasn't there and you don't have an answer for why he wasn't there and you had to
Hmm.
come up with one,
Hmm.
daddy issues. And
Yeah.
people don't realize like how our experiences shape so much. Like I'm a tell on myself. My husband probably gonna be very proud. Okay, he's probably gonna be very proud. I'm not even gonna tell him that I put this in the episode because
Hmm.
that's why I say God, family, purpose. Because I just let God lead me, right? I just let him tell me
Right.
like, do what you're supposed to do. Go ahead, tell it, right?
Hmm.
Like there were times where we would get into it, okay?
Hmm.
Because here's what you need to know: ain't nobody's marriage
Hmm.
perfect and glittery and gold. And
Period.
if it is, they don't really
They
care about
buy
each
it.
other.
They
They
don't.
not they don't love each other. Somebody not being themselves if you don't have
Hmm.
some sort of riffraff, okay?
Hmm.
So all that said, when we were younger into our marriage, he would be like, "This don't make any sense. Like I'ma leave," and he was like the person who was just like gonna, like I said, "Well, I guess you want to leave anyway, right? Like I mean,
Hmm.
I can't stop you." And his big thing, he used to always call me out. He said, I feel like if I say I'm gonna leave, then you just kind of like pushing me out the door. And I was like, no, but I also can't control you either. So what you want me to do? I was like, it's just like you want me to beg, but why say you want to leave in the first place if you don't want to leave? But
Hmm.
also the thing that was showing up for me that is if he did walk out the door, and by the way, when he would leave, he would like go drive and then come back home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it was this thing that I noticed, like sometimes there was almost like this sigh of relief on the inside.
Mm.
And it wasn't that I love my husband. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
imagine like doing life without him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I wasn't being myself, when I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't allowing myself to just be who I was, that relief of him walking out the door was about me taking off the layers, right? I don't have to be
Mm.
perfect. I don't have to people please. I don't have to worry about him leaving because he left already.
Mm-hmm. Because you were right about it.
All daddy issues. Like I was right. It was like I
Mm-hmm.
was just trying to prove myself right. Like self-fulfilling prophecy. See, I knew you was gonna leave
Exactly.
anyway. See, I
Mm-hmm.
told you. And we
Yeah.
don't realize that sometimes we are like tripping over our own feet to make things happen. That's why I say
Mm-hmm.
your beliefs are so impactful. If I'm running this script all the time that tells me he's gonna leave, I'm just counting down. I'm just counting down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether I know it intentionally or unintentionally, I'm counting down. But you said such a big thing. Self awareness is
Mm-hmm.
the biggest piece. And so
Mm-hmm.
when people come into therapy with me, like I'm like, look, we're not solving everything in a week. What we need to do first is figure out what's happening. Because nine
Mm-hmm.
times out
Right
of ten,
now. Yeah.
you don't know because you're not aware of yourself. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
start out like even just getting comfortable sitting with yourself. And I had a client to say to me, like, she finally had a breakup conversation with me, okay? Because I tell my clients, like,
Mm-hmm.
get prepared, have the breakup conversation with me, okay? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to break up with you. You need to break up with me. And it
Mm-hmm.
goes a little something like, it's not you, it's me. I've grown, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, I got my little stride on my own. And
Mm-hmm.
she said to me, I had a lot of feelings to come up this past week. And even with those feelings coming up, she said, I felt relief. I didn't feel scared of them. I
Mm-hmm.
just let them happen. And it was so freeing.
Yeah.
So people are like, but feeling's too hard. And I'm like,
Only
not
if you
feeling is
stay there hard.
exactly. I said, not feeling them is harder because now emoting all over the place
Mm-hmm.
about a whole lot of different things that have nothing to do with what you're presented with right now, right?
Yeah.
All of
I
those
think that
feelings still come out.
that's so. It's like we. I think that fear for your client you were just talking about has a lot to do with we. There's a fear of unknown. Your client was able to identify feelings. Like in my book and in my, because it's born out of my sessions, I put in my book too, the feelings wheel, because a lot of us,
Mm-hmm.
especially in our community, black people, black women especially,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have time, we're not allowed to, a whole bunch of other factors you insert that to actually even have an expansive emotional vocabulary. So you can tell me that you was pissed off at old buddy for putting hard eyes on the picture on some girl on Instagram. Cool. But it's more than that. Like if you think about the iceberg, I know you know the angry iceberg, right? There's more than it's
Mm-hmm.
anger is a secondary emotion.
Yep.
There's a lot going on under the anger that you feel first before you actually present as angry, right? You're likely feeling disrespected, unheard, invalidated, all these things, which we don't really know how to put a word to. And I'll have clients say, I don't know if this makes sense. But and I'm like, sis, we're essentially workshopping it. Let's just name where I'll pull up that feelings wheel and share my screen and be like, so she'll say disrespect. That's what it is. Like I'm mad, but it's that disrespect. And the reason why it's so powerful for you to know exactly what it is, what daddy issue symptoms you may identify with, what level of anger it is because if I know that I'm feeling abandoned and
Mm-hmm.
not just sad, then I'm going to go and search for a coping skill that is appropriate.
Yes.
I'm not going to go and like watch Netflix and eat ice cream and expect to feel better
Mm-hmm.
after like one episode if I'm really feeling a deep seated level of rejection, right? Like
Absolutely.
that's gonna need a different level of care. So if you
Mm-hmm.
know exactly what you feel, where it comes from, what you're telling yourself, like you said, your behaviors, you're telling yourself he's gonna leave you because you believe it, and that's coming
Mm-hmm.
from a space of rejection or abandonment, possibly from mommy or daddy issues, then you're gonna move that differently. Your self care plan is gonna look more than it's gonna look like more than hitting the blunt. because when you come down, their issues still going to
All the
be
problems
there.
still there. Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to need to go to Amanda or find Christian and figure out what we say about blah, blah, blah. Right? Like it's garbage in, garbage out. Perhaps you are ignoring yourself and you're not aware of yourself because you're following all these influencers on TikTok who have internet degrees. And not to say that I went to an online school, but they just call themselves influencers and coaches and things.
Girl,
Don't even get
please.
me started.
We ain't talk about. I listen. Okay, I know people who went to brick and mortar school
I went to
and
both.
still don't know how to apply. So it's
I just
about.
talk about the people who are just like on the
Mm-hmm,
TikTok saying all the random things. And life experience is valuable, and I get it.
mm-hmm.
But we can't just be doing that for entertainment. Like,
Well,
why are you not going to therapy?
and here's the thing though, because
Mm-hmm.
and that's the hard part because a lot of what people are hearing out there, it sounds good,
It does because they're
but
clickbait. It sounds right.
I can
Oh.
poke holes all through that. I was like, maybe like people will
Mm-hmm.
probably laugh at me, okay, because I'm not
Mm-hmm.
this full transparency. I'm gonna end up having a self care series come out soon because people are really, I think, so people are definitely monetizing self care, but it's also becoming superficial. So part of self care
Yes,
can
it's
be
watered
about
down.
spending. It can be about spending money, but what are you spending money on,
Yes,
right? Like
exactly.
what does that feel like? Because self care for everybody looks different,
Mm-hmm.
and so people say like self care Sunday, and it's cute and all, but I take
Right.
issue with that because I'm
Uh-huh.
like, not just Sunday. Like self care is a lifestyle, and
Mm-hmm.
it's about your physical, your mental, your spiritual. It's so much more than I'm gonna go get this massage because I used to
Yeah.
be like, girl, I'm self care, right? But
Mm-hmm.
now my self care is like. Are you checking in with yourself? Do you know how you feel
Mm-hmm.
right now? Did you eat today? How much water
Mm-hmm.
have you had? Did you do your skincare routine, right? Because you like when your face has that extra glow. Did
Mm-hmm.
you make sure you just go to the salon and get a good wash because you like for your scalp to feel brand new?
Mm-hmm.
Did you go
Mm-hmm.
take a walk outside and look at the trees?
Mm-hmm.
Did
Did
you
you
allow
journal? Did you
j-
read that good book that you put down 5 months
all
ago?
all the
I started reading
things?
again recently, so I'm talking to
All the
myself.
things, right?
Yes.
And journaling is one of those things that I love, but I never made time. Well, even when I was young, I used to
Hmm.
write all of my
Me
feelings
too.
that,
Yeah.
like, girl, I used to
Hmm.
have whole got
Yeah.
like,
Different notebooks and
yes,
putting pins and stickers.
everywhere. So like, and that's one of the reasons. Like, so I do have a journal coming out called Mindful. So there's a
Hmm.
digital version and the print version, but it's meant to be this place where you can track goals, and then every day you're kind of like writing down this affirmation for yourself. And for me, it's supposed to feed every aspect, so physical, mental, spiritual. So you have it
Hmm.
tracked for your physical, mental, spiritual. You can set goals, you can brain dump because we all need to brain.
Yeah,
I
we need
call it
that.
brain dump and like get it out. Setting up like 3 goals a day. Because I tell people like you should not have more than 3 must-dos in a day. Like this whole
Hmm.
idea that we have to be like produce, 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 like
Yeah.
that's stupid. I don't I don't care.
Just call it what it is.
America taught us that, okay?
Yes. Hmm.
And that's not, it's not healthy to just feel like there's 25 things on the list and you're expecting yourself to get it done. It's
Yeah.
erroneous. And we actually need to care for ourselves well so that we can be more productive, so that we can feel clearer and
Hmm.
get things done in less time. So for me, it's the morning supplication and, noon appreciation. And,
Hmm.
then in the evening, you taking the time to reflect. You're
Wind down.
checking your
Right.
mindful moments. Like
Hmm.
those things are so important,
Hmm.
and it's about investing in yourself. We spend all our time investing in other people. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this for that person. I need to do this for that person. But we're our greatest investment.
Hmm.
And guess who made the biggest investment in us? God. So
Hmm.
I think He wants His investment to be taken care of, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, I, you know, and that part of it is just learning to sit with yourself, knowing the things that you struggle with. Like,
Hmm.
there's so much freedom in that.
Yeah, you can't do that unless you actually slow down. So, and I think that's when you said you brought up God, and I was listening to a sermon. I think it was a Mike Todd sermon like a couple years ago, and he was talking about how Jesus, um, he achieved all of his miracles, and you will never see Jesus running nowhere. And I was like, oh, he really don't. He said, I mean, even when somebody died and there was a lady who was bleeding, and like she said, if I just touched the hem of his garment, like he was just chilling, he was walking, you know. Um, there's no reason to rush. Like, where do we learn this? And so that I even have there's a chapter in my book, the earthly father versus heavenly father,
Mm-hmm.
because my spiritual conceptualization and my relationship with God, a man, really it me and God be having tug of war. We go back and forth because of my daddy issues, right? Like we if I believe Jesus is a man and he calls himself my father and my earthly father presents himself a certain way and my human brain can only wrap myself my that concept of a father around what I'm given, then that impacts how I see God. So like I saw God as like this shaking his finger at me, you gotta do this or else. And so when I was doing my work on my daddy issues, going to therapy, my therapist at the time told me that she was like, "Yeah, your spiritual development. No wonder you don't trust God because you don't trust your earthly father because that's what we have to tangibly hang on to." It's such a powerful thing, and that was a turning point for my spiritual walk because I'm like, I had to relearn that connection with God even.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, I had to see him with my adult brain and with that in mind that you mean you could just love me just because? So that's where grace comes from, and that's why grace is a huge part of my Couch Christian platform because grace saved my life. And I have to remind myself daily that I don't have to do anything to have grace. I was about to say earn, but that's the whole point of grace that you don't earn it, right? You're just given.
Mm-hmm. It's given.
Um, so if it's a freely given thing, then the what comes with that I think is like this freely given uh, idea that you can be aware of your trauma. You don't have to be the product of your trauma so much so that you live in fear. Like that is grace. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
woman with grace, so I understand that I have the skill set. I know my resources to be able to work this through. And so for me, grace is an acronym. So that's part of the practical tool set. So at the end of my
Yes.
book and um, what I like people to walk away with are practical tools. How do I get over mommy or daddy issues? And so I put it in this system called the GRACE method. The stands for getting to know your symptoms, rescripting negative messages, addressing self care needs, connecting with healthy people, and enforcing proper boundaries. So
Yes.
my clients and I, we work through that. I use it myself. It's not a linear thing. It is something that if you're aware of these things, if you're aware of your symptoms, getting to know my symptoms in the GRACE method, you also are getting to know your triggers. So what is it in your relationship that's bringing up your daddy issues? Like if you know what your triggers and your symptoms are, then now we can have this conversation about rescripting messages because obviously those are informed by
Yes.
something you're telling yourself. When you know these things, you know to get to know your symptoms, you know that these are scripts that you need to redo, you need to reevaluate, you can recreate experiences. That's another piece of the R, right? Then now, if I know this about myself, then I can properly choose what these self care system's going to look like for me. You were just talking about self care where it's like, people just make it so cute, it's watered down. You use the GRACE method and you really do that work to understand what my triggers and symptoms are, and you're rescripting those messages, your self care is going to look different. So addressing your self
So
care
different.
needs are going to look different. It's going to feel different. It's going to be more impactful because you will have worked that GRACE method to see, okay, so going to brunch with the homies is not going to be enough. You know what I'm saying? Like we
Listen,
got to do something else.
and for some of us, it exhausts us. I'm like, I don't want to go to the brunch with
Man,
the homies. I'm
I
gonna go by
know.
myself.
And I can tell
Okay.
you, I don't even go really to brunch. The brunch. I've been to one or two in my adult life because I'm like, bro, I'd really rather just sit here. If I got to put on a face and things in the middle of the day when I didn't work all week, I don't want to stand brunch. But that's these kids. But it's a thing. Like the grace method, your grace space where you can come to my community and we talk it through. Like we really work the grace method. I just had a training where I was talking to my colleagues about resolving the parent trap. So that's why I train my colleagues about how to work through mommy and daddy issues. So a couple weeks ago, I revealed mommy issue symptoms for the very first time. We workshop the grace method. They have handouts and tools to actually do it because, like you said, as a supervisor, it's I love being in that position too. I'm an LPCS, and in my new position, I'll be able to help with practicum and internships, students at the university. They're going to learn the grace method because, period. I want to inform mental health in a way that I didn't get because they weren't teaching this in master's programs. And so if I really
Still
believe
not.
in, still not. And if I want to, and I've been given this opportunity to work on a campus to inform new counselors, then I'm hoping that they will learn daddy issues are a thing, mommy issues are a thing. Christian has exactly what the bullet points are. I'm going to teach you the grace method. So when you go and do your thing, it'll be part of your repertoire, like CBT, right? So I'm really excited about that opportunity because I don't know that anyone's talking about daddy issues the way I do. You walk
I
away
haven't
with
come
it.
across anybody. I haven't come across
Hmm.
anybody. I
Yeah.
think that's such a necessary niche, right? Like
Hmm.
such a big need. And listen, I'm hopeful that this is going to go everywhere because people do need to recognize
Hmm.
that their primary relationships, absolutely, if they're not aware of them, that
Hmm.
they're absolutely impacting their relationships right now, whether they want to believe it or not, right?
Hmm.
These
Hmm.
dynamics where we can just identify everything that's wrong with the other person, but we haven't figured out what we're dealing with or the lens that we're viewing it through. It
Yeah.
that all of that informs our perspective, and so we prevent ourselves from reaching so much of our potential because we're stuck. Right?
Hmm.
We just think, I believe what I believe. I'm good
Hmm.
overall. I make it day to day. There's so
Hmm.
much more to life. We're so much more complex than that. And
Hmm.
whew, we could probably sit on the soapbox all day just talking about
I
how complex
know.
we are.
I know. One step at a time. And that's what, even when I'm in session with the client and it feels overwhelming when so many things are coming to the surface, then I'm EMDR trained. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. For those who don't know, it's a dope intervention for survivors of trauma. It can really kind of cut your sessions in half with your therapist. It's amazing, right? It's on my
Mm-hmm.
website. I have it on my therapy page so people can know what it is, a video about it. But it is one of the things I learned when I was being trained to do EMDR is that it's like a domino effect. Like I've always heard root core beliefs, right? They inform all the things that we do, our behaviors, when we move and stuff like that. But that training really helped me see that I have all these seemingly unrelated experiences, but they taught us to, there's a core experience out of which you told yourself, I have to think this way to feel safe, and it informs everything after that. So sometimes people are like, oh my God, it's going to be here forever. And I'm like, no, sis, you're not. Because we're going to find, like you said, the woman who was in the storm with her parents and dad was on the other side of the house and she called him for the first time. The very first time he actually said nothing and he wasn't there for her, he probably didn't hear her. But in that moment, she
She
learned,
was. Mm-hmm.
I'm alone. I have to do this by
Yep.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's probably something she might have carried on in her life
Yep.
in relationships.
For
I got
sure.
to have me. It's not gonna get done right unless I do it, right? That is something that we would work out with EMDR. But I want people to feel hopeful that if it's a lot of different experiences that you can't make sense of, guarantee there's an experience, the one thing that we can just undo that would be like a domino effect in every way you move because we found that root core belief and experience. So it sounds like a lot. I know some people get intimidated by the work that we do. Um, but if you're, I'm quite sure if you're in even one of our chairs, Amanda's office or mine, you'll get to it. It'll be at a pace that's comfortable and you are fully capable
Yes.
of handling more than what you think. And everything you need, you already have. It's just clouded by all these things that you've been telling yourself all these
Mm-hmm.
years. So let's just do the work and figure out what it is.
Yes, and it's interesting because you know um, EMDR is becoming
Mm-hmm.
more widely known. Like I literally have people reach out to
Mm-hmm.
looking for EMDR,
Mm-hmm.
and I also ended up getting the opportunity to do it a lot. I used to do these
Mm-hmm.
post critical incident seminars with law enforcement, and we would
Mm-hmm.
literally do. I see them one time for like 30 minutes, and
Mm-hmm.
you have no idea how it would change the way they
Mm-hmm.
viewed that officer involved incident or experience that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And before we do that, like we spend the entire first day of every single one of them going around the room sharing information about their incident. So you're talking a full day of
Mm.
like 60 something people
Oh God.
sharing traumatic experiences in a
Mm-hmm.
room. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about draining, okay?
Yes, my God.
And the interesting thing though that I like to tell people, I said, with EMDR, you don't necessarily have to walk me through the entire experience, but you're gonna have to feel it.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And bringing up the feeling, bringing up the experience, bringing up the tenseness in your body that goes along with it, remembering the smells, like it's meant to bring up all those associations so
Mhm.
that you can reprocess it in a healthy
Yep.
way.
Yep.
And I'm like, if you resist feeling
Mhm.
the feelings, it's not going to work. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you
Mhm.
jump into this, be ready to feel the feelings, because the goal in mind is to get to the other side, is to be able to view yourself a little bit different. And I don't know about you, I'm sure you have heard people say this, but I've had so many people tell me, like, after a session, oh my goodness, I didn't think I was going to feel this different. Like, they were
Yeah.
just like, I, really? And I'm like, and I had one tell me, she said, I literally kept trying to bring the experience up to see if I
Mhm.
could trigger myself, and it wasn't happening. And I was like, okay,
Girl.
all right. She said she trying to test the theory.
You got her excited
Listen,
about that thing, girl.
I said, test it, honey, test it. And she
Mhm.
said, it was even more vague. She said I could not bring up those feelings that I once had. It didn't
Mhm.
feel intrusive. And I said, that's the point.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why.
But, you know, fear. So on the first session, I'm talking to my clients and I'm like, look, today I'm a complete stranger,
Mhm.
but it's going to take a
Mhm.
little time to get to know each other. And the connectedness piece is so important. You have to be sitting in front of someone who you really feel is there for your benefit, to support you, to
Mhm.
work with you, to challenge you. I tell my clients too, I was like, that's why I was like, dang, we probably in each other's mind. We probably have really similar session breakdowns.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I tell mine, I'm like, look, some days you're going to be like, oh my God, Amanda, I love you. And then other days you're going to be like, you get on my damn nerves.
Period. I have got that. Like, you
And
had to be like that. I'm like,
then,
sis,
listen, they said, and one of them got quiet one time. She was like, oh, shoot, that stings.
yeah.
But
Look,
that's the
use your coping
point.
skills, sis. Breathe while it's
Mm-hmm. That's the point of having that connection, though, and like really sitting in that transparency, because they know it's
Mhm.
not coming from a place of judgment.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
coming from one of care and consideration and
Mhm.
commitment to helping you get to where you're trying to go. And
Mhm.
I'm trying to tell you, it's okay to address that. Sometimes you're gonna look at me like I don't want to talk to you no more, and it's fine,
Yeah.
because I'm gonna be like, I'll see you next week. All
Right.
right.
You be on my calendar.
See you next week, sweets. And we gonna keep moving. But I just want to thank you like so much, because I feel like you've brought so much transparency to this conversation. But not only that, just recognizing how you took an experience of yours, right? Because we
Mhm.
talk about transference and knowing all the things that you deal with, but people sometimes don't realize that some of the great works, the things that we put out into the world, come from our experiences.
Yeah.
And a lot of our life's purpose comes from our experiences.
Mhm.
So I love how you turned your experience into something meaningful that people can really use to get to know
Mhm.
themselves better, to be aware, to address things, to say, like, it's okay, you're not the only one in the world, right? And kind of desensitizing the daddy issues, because I'm not offended by that mug at
Yes.
all. Matter of
Thank
fact, I'm
you.
gonna get me one.
Thank
I'm gonna
you.
buy me one. Your daddy issues are showing, because
Yes.
you know
I need
sometimes
that
I might have to,
reminder.
so sometimes I have to
Mhm.
look at it, right?
Mhm.
Or your perfectionism is like, you're projecting your perfectionism, because I did that
Mhm.
a lot on other people,
Yeah.
projecting this expectation of perfectionism. I'm like, oh wait, no,
Yeah, that's
don't do
my
that.
stuff.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's why I was like, I work with clients all the time, and I'm like, I want you to ponder, okay? Because a lot of how you respond to people is about the things you're experiencing. So what do you think about what people say to you?
Mhm. Mhm.
Our responses come from our experiences. It's our own lens on the world. Most of the time, it has more to do with what they're feeling than you. But we take
Yes.
those things and we make them our
Mhm.
responsibility. So,
Mhm.
girl,
Oh yes. I know we could talk forever, child.
we
I'll come
could.
back. Just let me know when.
I, Tay, I'm always ready. We can always.
Mhm.
I love having the tough conversations. I come out of them feeling rejuvenated, and people be
Mhm.
like, "Really?"
You know.
But the ones about myself, though, because I'm not even gonna lie, like working with clients, like I don't think clients realize that too. Like working with clients,
Mhm.
sometimes it takes a lot to create space for other people.
Yeah.
And sit with them in their feelings
Mhm.
and kind of work with them through things. And so it can be draining. I still
Mhm.
love the work, but at the end of the day, I don't want to talk to
Yeah.
nobody. Like, I'm like,
Yeah, that's why I've cut back on my one-on-one sessions just because I realized how it was. I was taking that draining energy or drained energy into my family. I feel bad because I have a 6-year-old. He can afford that. He's always wanting to play. So I'm like,
mm-hmm.
oh, I gotta save some for my babies now.
Yes, got to coordinate
Yes.
that schedule. So all that said, though, then
Mhm.
thank you, Christian, once for talking about breaking the cycles of healing and abandonment. Just
Mhm.
know all of Christian's links, how you can access her, they will be in the show notes. Get in contact with her. She's about to get real busy. So, I mean, you won't have to come out the pocket if you're trying to get some of her time.
Yeah.
Okay. She got to still work on that balance. We are always working on that and
Mhm.
figuring it out. So, if there's anything you would want to leave our
Mhm.
listeners with today, what would that be?
It would be what something I've already mentioned because it's been showing up a lot for me, and that is everything I need I already have. So trust yourself.
Mm.
That has to be it. Trust yourself that not that everything will go right, but that you have everything you need so that when things don't go as planned, you can handle it. Trust yourself, regardless of how it
Ooh,
goes.
that's a whole word.
Yeah, I'm
That's
walking
okay.
that right now. Yeah.
I think I'm walking it too, and I'm gonna make
Mhm.
sure I type that out and put that in the show notes too. Take that along with you.
Mhm.
Affirmations to yourself are so important. They
Mhm.
inform your beliefs in your everyday life, and that's one way you can get started. So, once
Yes.
again, you heard it here first with Christian. Make sure that you tune in next week for our next episode. More info to come soon, and you're gonna know how to get in touch with Christian. So, we're going to close it out with our favorite values: God, family, and purpose. Have a good day.
Bye.